Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Eightseven Talks. I am so honored and pleased and delighted to be joined by Dr. Joanna Abeyie. Dr. Joanna, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. You don't have to call me Doctor though. You just call me. You can just call me Joe. Fine.
so, so just to jump into it, I guess for people who don't know you, how would you briefly describe yourself?
Um, I'm friendly. No, I run Blue Moon, which is a diversity and inclusion and equity consultancy business.
Mm-hmm.
We do three things. We look at culture transformation in the workplace. So that's kind of a large part of our consultancy piece. We look at executive search, so we find senior C-suite, non-exec directors, trustees, chairpersons for businesses. And our third service is diversity metrics. So we look at your business people data and make sure that we have one collected all of that data
Mm.
where possible, so that we're able to monitor the treatment progress and development of and retention
Mm.
of those individuals, and use some of that data to guide some of the work that we do around our culture transformation. So, if we don't really know the makeup of an organisation and we don't know who fares better at different parts of the recruitment process, for example, it can be difficult to rely mainly on anecdotal um, references. So we
Mm.
use quantitative data to make sure that actually all of our qualitative findings are backed up again, really, by this second piece, which is the data. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but we're an inclusion consultancy business, and I guess what I've just done is break down how we provide that consultancy.
No, I love the sound of it. I mean, just jumping on that thing where you said talking about changing culture in companies. So when you go in to start a project, is it that the companies approach you, or do you approach them?
Yeah, so touch wood. I've been incredibly lucky
Mm.
that I've very rarely in the last uh, 4 or 5 years
Mm-hmm.
have had to approach a company. So
Wow.
in the early days I did, and then our reputation started to kind of speak for itself in a very lucky way, and lots of
Mm.
people were recommending us. So that's been brilliant. But as I say touch wood because I never rest on my laurels. Like that could
Of
change at any
course.
minute, right? So I'm very thankful that that's been the case. So no, I haven't had to approach anyone. Most of the time, people are introduced to me. And when last year, when we saw the death of George Floyd,
Mm.
there was another like surge, another influx, if you like, of interest in the work that we did, which came from recommendations. Luckily, not only did I work with some great companies, but I had nice relationships with those people. So when
Mm.
they moved on or I moved on, like they've been on that journey with me. So we've been like real allies for each other. So if anyone asks them about consultancy or anything like that, they've been really kind and said, you should use Jo and her team. Um, so yeah. So essentially, that's kind of how it grew, if you like. I haven't had too much.
And I think what you've just said there's a really key point about relationships, because a lot of times when we're doing anything, it is about relationships are very important. That's the foundation of what makes us as humans, right? So when you are going into these companies, when you cultivate these relationships with people, what do you do? Because I know some people, you always talk about your network is your net worth and networking is important, but those can just become cliche phrases. What have
Yeah.
you found has been like a very effective tool to maintain and cultivate these relationships with people?
I'm a like I am very emotional
Mm.
and an empath. So I think that's played a big part in being able to do the job that I do. I really care.
Mm.
So if I think about like, because it's really difficult for me to say like how I
No,
do
of
it.
course.
I feel like I'm blowing my own trumpet, but like the feedback I've had,
Hmm.
okay, is that I'm high energy,
Mm.
so I always talk very passionately about it, about diversity and inclusion, like whichever area I'm discussing, whether that's intersection of many experiences, or if I'm talking about one in particular. And so, and I'm really passionate. So quite often I'll get clients go, I don't know how you do it. How do you stay this upbeat? It's so hard. Like, and that will
Mm.
be, D&I leads in an organization that are trying to kind of get their own, um, like, like things off the ground, and they're finding it so like hard to do that. And then I kind of come bouncing in like, yay, let's do this. I think sometimes they think like, how do you have that energy?
Mm.
I think what I would say then that I've taken from that is that I'm high energy, I'm enthusiastic, I'm really passionate about it.
Mm-hmm.
I never make anybody feel bad, hopefully, about like not knowing stuff. I always say that it's like an educational journey. Like,
Mm.
so you have to be really open to getting it wrong, and not like hating yourself for getting it wrong, like understanding that you don't know what you don't know, and giving yourself almost that bit of space to make a mistake, with the aim that you're wanting to do better, you're wanting to know better. So I always say, it's like my phrase that all my clients say back to me, like, once you know better, you do better. So I always say, like, it's different if you don't know any better, right? But once you've been educated on it, I expect you then to move from that standpoint, right? To operate from that place.
Mm.
So I think that helps, to keep the relationships going, that I allow people the space to be human, like, and to not know everything.
Mm.
I also I'm really confidential, so I don't ever share with other companies what I've discovered in other companies. And I do that
Mm.
on purpose, really, because I don't think it's fair. I don't think any company's where they want to be. I think everyone's learning. And I think
Mm.
what's more important is that they've engaged with an organization, whether it's mine or anybody else's, that's helping them to get to the place they want to. So I don't think it's my uh, job, if you like, to share the secrets of others. So I reference things that have gone on, but I'll never say the company that are
Mm.
going through it, for example. Um, I always end up like getting to know people really personally. I don't know why. I just like the reason I say that is, like, if I think about it now, like one of my really good friends, it's like a best friend, started off as a client, and
Oh wow.
yeah, a lot of them have to, like, and then we end up being friends.
Now, today's video is in partnership with a hot new brand that you should know all about, and their name is Butterbox. Now, Butterbox is a gift box of delectable African snacks. It contains all your yummy favorites, such as plantain chips, roast groundnuts, chin chin, and the ones that take you all the way back, like coconut candy, koro koro, and kuli kuli. Each gift box contains a familiar drink to wash everything down, like Chapman, Malta Guinness, Zobo, and of course, palm wine. Now, there are 5 box options to choose from, ranging from the Vexi Moni box all the way up to the Owambe box, which is suitable for larger groups. Head over to butterbox.com to order your box today. You don't want to miss out. They are amazing.
What I think is annoying, like, you shouldn't do, right? This is, I guess, an easier place to start from. It's like, don't have like, how can I phrase? Okay, here's a way of doing it. So I get
Mm.
a message on LinkedIn all the time. So anyone listening to this, and if you're on LinkedIn, this is why I don't want to refer it. It's like, when I get messages, they'll go, "We can get you leads. We're a lead generator."
Mm.
And then what they'll essentially do is send cold uh, messages to everyone.
Which is
I
just,
just do not operate like that. I just
yeah.
do not operate like that. I can't even bring myself to, I just wouldn't. It's just not me.
Mm.
So sometimes I think how you keep a real relationship is you have to be, like, without sounding all like J-Lo, but yeah, you have to come from a place of like realness, right? So
True.
like don't create like false relationships
Mm.
based on these generated like emails. If you want to see how someone's doing, see how they're doing. Like, if you care about someone, like during lockdown, no one was spending any money on like things. Like in the first one, everyone was nervous, they were having to let people go, they didn't even know how to, like, no one was prepared, no companies were prepared for what that was providing.
Mm.
So when I was checking in with clients, I was checking they're okay. Like, some of
Mm.
these clients I'm working with work in HR, they're having to make people redundant, people they love, they've worked with for years, because they don't have the money. Like, that's not easy, that's horrible actually. So
Mm.
it's like and it's a job you've got to do, but you're like, I'm about to release people into a global pandemic. Like,
Mm.
whether it's your job in HR or not, you're also a human being, and that's not a
That's
nice
true.
thing to happen. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when you know that if it was happening to you, you'd be devastated because of the situation that you're also in, which is the same. So it's like checking in on them for a genuine reason. Like, that's, I think, But I'm not saying let me check in on them for a genuine reason. I genuinely am concerned that they're not
Mm.
okay. How they're going to maneuver through this, because I've built, if you've been speaking to someone like for years on and off over whichever project, you start to care. So I think just operate from a place of like integrity, like,
Mm.
and when someone says to you that wasn't good enough, just go, I'm really sorry.
Of course.
talk through talk through what you'll do to move forward, and maybe where there was a misunderstanding, but accept that you've just done something that wasn't like at the expectation that they had, or at the standard at which they had. Just accept that as a
Mm.
piece of feedback. Like, don't let ego like get in the way of that. And but also in the job I do, for example, I have to. So one of the things as part of this culture transformation is I go into companies and I run a number of focus groups with the whole population of employees, or
Mm.
sometimes with smaller pockets. And essentially, then they'll tell me things that are not ideal. That, like, you know, and then I've got to report that back to someone that, one, I could have had a relationship with for a long time, or one that I've just got a relationship with because they've just got in touch with me to do this piece of work. So I'm just building that relationship. So you also got to learn to be like, to stand true to
Mm.
what's said to you. If you're for the cause, which is to remove inequity, even if that's going to give you anxiety as a consultant, as
Mm.
even with someone who's been doing this for as long as I have, you still get anxiety sometimes having to say to someone, do you realize how racist your organization is? Or do you realize how much sexual harassment is taking place in your organization? Like, standing there and saying that to a CEO isn't a nice piece of news to deliver. It's traumatic for you hearing it. Like, I'm a
Mm.
human. Like, it's
Of
not nice to
course.
hear people going through these things, right? And then and then you've got to tell it in a way that's unemotional, facts driven, and solution focused.
Mm.
So you have to also learn to just stand in that truth. Like, that's the situation, everyone. Like,
It's like that's it.
it might not be ideal, and no one wanted to hear it, but
Mm.
that's what we've got. So this is how we're going to fix it. So I
Mm.
also think that takes that, when I say that integrity about relationships, you've got to keep that integrity. You can't be thinking, oh, I'm not going to say that because I really get on with them and they're going to be devastated. Like, unfortunately, they might be devastated, but your job is always to, in what I do anyway, your job is to always make it fairer and more comfortable for the people that work in that organization.
That's a great response, and I think that's, at the end of the day, like as you said, making things fair and being true and honest. That's the most important thing people can ask for, because that's,
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, that's one of those things that makes the biggest difference in our lives. So, of course, in all the work you do,
Yeah.
you've done a lot of great work, as you've said. I think what's really interesting with people is what drives us to do these things. So what has inspired you to sort of get started down this path?
It's so funny you asked that, because I was asked it yesterday by someone that was doing some work with me. And so it's interesting because um, I forgot, but since I was a kid, and my friend reminded me the other day, like when that the race disparity report came out last week or the week before, we were talking about it, and I was saying, the sorts of sessions I have to run and how we tackle these conversations, and obviously I get really passionate about it, so I was saying it in a very animated and like passionate way. And she just said to me, "You've always been that person." Like, she left me a voice note and just said, like, "You have always been that person since school, Joe. You have hated
Wow.
people being treated unfairly. Like, it's something in you, like you can't bear it." And it wasn't until she said, I was like, so true. Like, I was always sticking up for people,
Hmm.
always sticking up. Like, if I thought something wasn't right, I was always saying that's not okay. Like, you can't do that. And like, so I think this, I just think I'm driven by this feeling that, how dare you make people feel like that?
Hmm.
I think, like, without getting too deep, I think there's been so many moments in my life where people have made me feel like a lesser than, or not enough,
Hmm.
or like, and it's hurt so bad, like, hurt so much.
Hmm.
So the feel, like, I can't bear anyone else to have that feeling. I just
Hmm.
literally can't bear it. So when I work with, that's what's driving me. It's I just want people to try and operate sometimes from a place of openness, to try and like try and listen to understand people, rather than like listen to respond or listen to defend. Like, just try and understand like what is going on for somebody. And I'm not saying that um I'm not saying that then you don't get to make a decision on whether you engage with that or whether you agree with it. I'm not suggesting that at all, but I just like that's your human right? I'm just saying that like how have we got into a space where we're all humans, right? We're all part of the human race. That's our race, okay? So how have we got into a place that if I'm in a wheelchair, you think that I'm lesser than you? I don't understand that. Like, how can you think that I'm lesser than you? If I have like dyslexia, why do you think you can talk to me as if I'm unintelligent, which is a microaggression that people with like dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia experience a lot. Like, if I have had a criminal conviction in the past, which I've like served my time for, and now I'm trying to move on and be productive, why do you think that you have a right to like make me feel bad about that, or like stop me getting a job because of that, or like, and when I say criminal conviction, I'm not the moral compass for the world, but when I'm saying that, you know, some of these convictions are not, they're forgivable convictions, right? They're not paedophilia, they're not murders. Like some of these things are silly choices made in teen years, like that, or younger years, because of whatever set of circumstance. I'm not talking here about rapists and people that do horrific, torturous things to people. I'm talking about crimes that you could forgive, rehabilitate. I feel like those people should kind of be like given a chance to still have a sense of pride, rather than having their like dignity taken away from them, like not being shaped by that essentially. So it's the same with sexual orientation. It's the same with race. So with ethnicity, I'm just like, I don't understand why we think that we can, like, a particular group feel that they are better than, or I don't get it. And I also think that life has this way of humbling you really
It's very true.
like, so quickly. So I'm always very aware that like you could be the most like respectable person and have a really tough time at work, for example, whatever respectable is, by the way, have a tough time at work and your mental health becomes incredibly difficult, and then life becomes harder. That can happen to any one of us at any point, right? So
That's true.
the reason why I feel like we need to be a little bit less judgmental or driven by judgments, or driven by, and obviously they are human nature, right? That's the way the way the mind works. We go to things that we seem familiar. We seek familiarity. We look for similarity. I understand all of that psychological bit, but it's about not knowing that, but then not letting that then determine how we treat people, right? You can do it, but then go, okay, right, I've acknowledged that's a bias, or acknowledged that's a stereotype, but I shouldn't act on that. That shouldn't motivate the way I now behave towards that person, right? So I think the thing that kind of drives me also is like, at any point we could be any of the things we judge.
That's
Does that
true.
make sense?
That's very,
So
very true.
it's a human obligation, that's what I think anyway, that we are kind to everyone and respectful. And I use the word tolerant because there are particular, I always say, when you talk about equality, it's not about like taking something from one group and like giving it to another. Actually, it's leveling the playing field, right? So for
Exactly.
example, if I have a particular faith, belief system of which I live by, my family live by, it could even be my country live by, there will be some things that unfortunately I don't agree with, or my faith doesn't allow me to agree with, support, however you want to phrase it, right?
Yeah.
Or I just don't agree, right? It doesn't have to be about my faith. Maybe I just don't agree, okay? But let's just say in those instances. So in the workplace, when we look at the Equality Act 2010, things like faith and sexual orientation are two of the protected characteristics. So if we want to provide both of those people with equity, so someone from a particular faith and someone of a particular sexual orientation, We have to allow them to both exist with respect, with fairness, with opportunity. So the reason I always use the word tolerance is, for example, if I fundamentally can't see eye to eye with the different belief systems, I have to tolerate them.
Of course.
Do you see what I
Exactly.
mean? I
Yeah.
have you don't have the right to not, right? So to well, some people do or think they do, but so I always say tolerate. Like where you won't necessarily see eye to eye, I think learn to tolerate the difference in those individuals and don't allow that to impact whether you would like recruit that person, promote that person, for example. Um, so that's where it comes from. I think one, I just can't bear other people feeling bad about who they are, irrespective of what who they are looks like or feels like or is. And then I don't like the idea that there are a set of humans that think that they are above life experiences that could impact us at any point. And so if you had a disabled child, what would you want society to do and treat them? If you acquired a disability, how would you like to be treated? If you made a mistake and ended up in prison, what would you want? If you had a mixed heritage child who was being bullied, how would you expect them to be treated at school? Though it's just those things. If your child said that they were transgender, what support would you expect to be around them? I think it's like any of these things could be happening to you or be your life at some point. So just that's what drives me. Like, try and make the shape the world that you want to live in, basically.
I guess on a personal question for you, I mean, you were awarded an MBE in the New Year's Honours List 2020. What did that mean to you when you received it?
It was like lovely and flattering. I was nervous to accept because obviously the work I do, you spend a lot of time reading a lot of books, and I'm not just talking about things that I haven't researched outside of my own lived experience and the lived experience of the people that are kind of sharing with me in these organisations. So there's that that I had to think about. So I rang my dad straight away. My dad is my black parent. He's in Ghana, so I rang him and said, do you think I should accept? Because of the foundations of empire and and the impact that has had on lots of minority groups, not just black. Um, and so that was my challenge. And then I thought, you're campaigning for inequity and have been doing so consistently for, like, as I say, could be 16 years now. Yeah. And then you accept an award from an establishment that historically, benefited from things that weren't ideal. Awful, really. And then, like, I'm a part of, like, a livery company. I've been part of a guild. I sit on boards of different organisations, and you suddenly just start going, like, hold on a minute, like, are some of these rooted in this? Like, have they been, has their success, been based on the oppression of others? And so I had to have a talk with my dad. I had to talk with my big brother. Like, my dad and my big brother are like my go-tos. My partner at the time was also my go-to on topics like this, of like, what do you think, should I? And then what we all kind of landed at was accepting the MBE was we thought would help me to continue to challenge the things I was challenging. So actually, I wasn't accepting it to suggest I was complicit with historical things that had happened. I wasn't saying, no, don't worry about that. Like, it's over now. I wasn't suggesting that at all. But what I was thinking was that if you want to change systemic things and structural things, surely you need to be a part of or involved in or connected to the very bodies, structures and systems that keep it all active. And so I thought, if they're inviting me into that when I'm anti all of those things, then hopefully that's a sign that we are moving on and that people are learning from some of the things. Now, when you think about, I never can say this word properly, repatriation,
reparations.
reparations. We obviously haven't got there yet, but then, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. Hopefully, that with enough of us making the noises that we're making and working as dedicated as we are in our different fields, hopefully some of these things do come through if ever possible. Maybe that's the optimist in me, the fairy in me, like it's been all like one day. But I'm hoping that, you know, if we continue this work, we do create a society where these things aren't happening anymore. And someone did point out to me, like, so much of this country is based on inequity that we wouldn't do anything. And I'm not saying that it makes it right, but there's so much, like, you know what I mean? We're all in some way feeding into a system that at one point oppressed our many elements of our identity, right? So whether that's our gender, whether that's our sexual orientation, whether that's, you know, us being disabled, or whether it's our color of our skin or our faith, at some point, right, the structures that be globally have exploited. So, I mean, if you think about like tea is seen as like a
Queen.
English thing.
True.
We don't even make tea.
Nope.
We're even from it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, but that's our thing. That's like, you know, if you go to America, they're like, cup of tea, would you like a cup of tea? And I'm like, how can it have become so synonymous with us and it's not even ours? And I'm not joking, I'm not laughing because I find that funny. It's just like the irony of like, so there's just so many spaces, isn't there, in which we could question the cocoa bean, or like the list goes on. Like, do you know what I mean? So it's yeah, I don't know. I just decided that if it helps me to continue to make changes on that basis, I will accept. And I'm not saying that since then I haven't worried and it hasn't crossed my mind again, because so many things have come out and I've had to call my brother and my dad and my now ex-partner and go, what do you think? Do you still think? And they've talked me through it again. But we've landed back in the place of, there's got to be change. And there's so many, like, of my peers as well, like older than me, with years of experience, that have accepted it and have gone on to do great stuff in this space, just kind of led the way. And actually the Cabinet Office are pushing really hard for more ethnic minorities to be getting these awards, to be recognised.
Wow.
And I'm only saying ethnic minorities because I'm an ethnic minority, but like, they're really pushing for that. They hold events where they tell you how to fill out the forms and stuff now. That's how much they're trying to not make it this exclusive club that doesn't represent Great Britain and all of its greatness. So they're obviously aware. And sometimes I think there is a point to make, and I say this with caution, is that, like, there is the structure, there is the sovereign, obviously, like the crown and things like that. And then there's a Cabinet Office. Like, I was in a nail shop, for example, like pre all of this, some years ago. And there was a woman, she was talking to me and chit-chatting. And then she works at the Cabinet Office. She was just a mum from Essex, like. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not saying she was just, there's nothing wrong with that. But what I mean is, she was as everyday as me, right? So I think, so when we do talk about some of these structures and things, like, yeah, that lady may have had biases, and of course, you know, we all do. But I don't know if she's a part of the structures and the systems. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think she's just a person that's actually, like, totally interacting with the diversity of the society that she lives in, right? So sometimes when we talk about these systems, just also be mindful that some of these systems are historically inbuilt, and actually the people that are working in them now are also actively trying to change them, because they're not from those times, they're not from that experience. So sometimes we do have to be mindful that when we're kind of criticizing them, there are everyday people like you and I, Clive, that are actually trying to just
have a job in a space where they think they can make a difference, like at the cabinet office. So, and then I think when they do make that work and they offer someone like myself that, I think like, let's all try and collectively, I always say it takes a village, let's all try and collectively actually put all these efforts together, and we might see that all untangle.
Oh, no, that's really
Long
good.
answer. Sorry, I always have long answers.
I mean that's really good to say. I mean, I think, I guess to add to just kind of add on to that, it's like what, because I mean you've said it at the beginning, and it sort of emanates through all you're saying. You're very passionate. You're a very, very passionate person. So what I would say is then what keeps you going every day? Like, what is your reason behind the things you do? Or if I was going to channel Simon Sinek, I'd say, what is your why?
What is my why? Start with why. Well, always when I get that, I always kind of think, why not? Like, why shouldn't I be? Why should I accept how things are? Like, that's one of my things. But you know, it's so interesting, right? What keeps me going every day? So I have some sayings around my room. One of them says, it takes a big heart to help shape little minds.
Wow.
And so sometimes I just, like, when I'm having one of those days, I'm like, I cannot believe that session I just had, or I can't believe how that manager made that person feel, or whatever. Like, I can't believe the level of racism within this school, or whatever. And then I've got it so that as soon as I go like that, I can see the pillow, and it just reminds me, like, you know what, like, it's gonna take a big heart to shape little minds. So sometimes it's like I have to take the sayings to help motivate me, if I'm to be really honest with you. I don't know, like when I don't know, it just annoys me so much. And I'm not going to get angry about it, like, if that makes sense. So I'm like, well, what can you do? And that's one of my bugbears as well. Like, if there's anything I can say to people, is like, when we saw like BLM happen, like, well, we saw the increased profile again of BLM, because it's not the first time, is it? They've been running a long time. I saw all these like activists, like, I call them like activists because that's probably how they might describe themselves, like online, sort of all giving their opinion. And I thought, great, what are you going to do though? Like, like, you are completely entitled to your opinion. You're completely entitled to share, like, your views and your experiences. All of those are valid. And then what? Like, because why do we keep giving the power to the people who benefit from the structures? Does that make sense? Like, it's so much harder for them to be passionate about something if it doesn't directly impact them. That's just human nature, right? Like, do you know what I mean? So you have to get them amped up. You have to get them excited about it. Like, it's like when your kids don't want to go and do something, you have to start making it way more exciting than it is. Like, or bribe them. You won't get sweets if you don't. Do you know what I mean? Like, you have to find you have to find something to motivate them into wanting to do it, right? So I'm thinking, but you're motivated. Like, it impacts you. It impacts your kids. It impacts your friends. It impacts your sisters, your brothers, your aunties, your uncles. Like, so what are you going to do? Like, and that's my only bugbear, is like, by all means speak your truth, but please, like, you do not need to be a millionaire or the most famous person to make a change in, like, you really don't. Like, when I set up what I was doing with Shine Media, I had a borrowed laptop from college in a bedroom that used to have damp dripping. Like, that's how poor we were. Like, you trust me, you can start with what you have. Don't talk about what you don't have. You can always start with what you do have. So sometimes I'm always like, I love that you want to speak and that you're articulate and you can say all you want to say, wherever you're from, whatever your background, whatever you look like. But then what? Like, please, like, that's my only thing. Because you know what happens? Like, the energy decreases.
That's true.
Something else happens, and we get excited about that. And then there's the people. Why it annoys me is then there's the people that have been doing and fighting for something for a long time. It's like when you think about the UN or the World Health Organization or the World Economic Forum. There's all these organizations that are out there trying to deal with things, and then we have one event, so we all get behind it. and then they have to continue, and then all the energy stops, and so
Mm.
none of the organisations bother with them anymore. And then what they're doing is like really meaningful work, but because there's no like energy around it, nothing changes. So I think if you are one that's just going to speak, keep speaking then.
Mm.
Like, don't let people off the hook. Keep speaking so that it becomes like a really public narrative, so that companies don't think, oh, our audiences aren't thinking about that anymore, so we can move on.
It's true.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
Mm.
businesses are ruled by customers, right?
Mm.
If you don't buy it, we can't make it. If you don't watch it, we can't play it. Like, do you know what I mean? So it's like, keep, if you're going to make a noise, don't stop making a noise. If that's your thing, don't stop making the noise, because the moment
Mm.
you start getting silent is when the interest falls off. If you don't like racism, never stop talking about the fact that you don't like racism. Like, and make it public. Don't jump on things, because then, and then what? You know, it's like so undoing. So I think what motivates me is if I stop, I feel like, what if we all stop then?
Mm.
Then what?
That is a really good.
So it takes my
Mm.
energy, it takes my colleagues' energy, it takes every person I know out there that are working in a similar space. It takes their energy to make a change. Like, otherwise nothing happens. We just all talk about it, and then something else comes in the news, and that's what we talk about.
Wow. So of course, you talked earlier about people's challenges throughout this whole lockdown type period, in terms of people having to let people go, in terms of dealing with that kind of pressure from a HR perspective. Just looking in terms of your work with creative people, because you do a lot of work with Black creatives. I guess what inspired you? Because I know you talked about diversity and I guess leveling the playing field. So in particular, your work with Black creatives, what made you go down that route?
So it's moved on slightly. So I
Mm-hmm.
started on the creative route in the beginning. We've moved on now. Like, a lot of our clients are financial services, civil engineering, charities, education sector. So it's moved on, just because what we were doing within the creative space, there was no reason why we couldn't have done it
Mm.
in any space. To be honest, it was a process and an approach, rather than a sector specific
Mm.
solution. It came from my own experiences, really. Like, when I was doing my work experience at sixth form, which I managed to get some support from my careers advisor, Dawn, who I still adore. I realised that how many barriers there are. So, like, I grew up in a council estate in southwest London, and doing work experience back then, which would have been in 2003, you you didn't really, like, you didn't get your lunch paid, you didn't get like expenses or anything like that, like they've made happen now. So I'd like walk to work experience, I'd like go without lunch, and I was thinking,
Wow.
how hard is this? Like, and I'd do it for weeks. Like, literally,
Mm.
I'd walk to Waterloo, and I lived in Battersea, I'd walk to Oxford Circus, I'd walk to because my parents didn't have the money to keep like allowing me to keep funding me working and volunteering in these places, but I knew that I had to do that to get in. And I remember my dad saying, like, you're doing so much work experience in these places, like, can't they help you a little bit? Like, can't they find a way? And it's like, when you think about it, it's like, it feels a bit criminal, if I'm honest, like, looking back now, because in these same places where they wouldn't like give like expenses, they like wouldn't cover your expenses, they would like, and they did start to during the period I was doing work experience, but in the beginning, I did work experience across. So when I was in sixth form, when I was in university, the first degree, and then when I did my master's, so I did it through all of that. So that's over like 6 years. So things did change, but in the beginning, it was weird, because like they'd like have treats coming round for particular events, for like the whole office, like, of 70 plus magazines, the whole building like would get it. And you're
Wow.
like, and you can't give the work experience. Like, back then, the bus passes used to be like £4 a week,
Mm.
and they're like a huge company. I mean, when we set up as Shine Media, none of us got paid, but we were doing it for a labour of love. Like, none of us had any money to get paid. Like, you know what I mean? But when you're a big organisation, I think that's slightly different, isn't it? So that was a barrier. Then when I got into the places, I did eventually see. So there was Selena, there was Laurie, Dion. So there were 4 ethnic minorities that I've just counted.
Wow.
Do you know what's so just interesting about what I just said? As I counted them, 2 of them were on one magazine and 2 of them were on another. So
Wow.
that means actually across all of the magazines on the shelf that you would possibly see, and I worked at pretty much all of them, they were the only minority.
That is insane.
There were 4, basically, which is like, yeah, it is insane, isn't it? And so, and I realised that was a barrier. That I realised that. So, what's the correlation here? Like, why are there so few there? Then the first person with a disability that I saw, I was 22 and I started doing work experience at 16.
Wow.
And this person was blind and she worked on a trade publication. So then I was thinking, so there's something going on there. Sexual orientation, obviously people don't, unless they tell you, you wouldn't know someone's sexual orientation. So that I didn't get too much of a kind of inkling of. And when I did see people that had like, disclosed their sexual orientation, it primarily was gay men, and they seemed to be represented in terms of they were working within these publications, but whether their experiences were particularly pleasant, I'm sure they dealt with some microaggressions, and class wise, which was I think one of the biggest things I spotted, was that when I was doing my work experience, I was walking and not eating lunch, and then there were girls that just had like £20 to go to prep daily, and then like were staying. I remember one of the girls that worked on one of the magazines with me, and she's fortunate. It's not her fault, but I'm just trying to give you how different the experience would be. She had a relative who had a place in where were they now? In Canary Wharf. So she was staying in like an apartment in Canary Wharf while that relative was away. So she was like coming on the tube. She had this lovely, so like doing work experience for her, it's just a much more pleasant experience. Whereas trying to, and it's bigger than that too, because then when you're doing work experience, right, and you're from a different background like I was from, you don't even really know how to speak to the individuals in those workplaces because they all seem smarter than you, of a higher class than you, like glamorous. Like I was working in magazines at that time. So like, and you're this little like kid from like Patmore Estate in Battersea, like, do you know what I mean? You don't even know how to really speak to those individuals because they're not like, and the majority of them obviously were always white, but they weren't like the white girls in my school because the white girls in my school were working class like me. So we would speak in a particular way, we would behave in a particular way. We understood I don't know if you call it a culture or a language or a life language or whatever. It was different to them. So it was just like when you got there, it wasn't just about like what you looked like. You had to try and fit in. Like, and I just thought, this is just ridiculous that these magazines are selling like 300,000 a week, some of them at the time. And not only are we not reflected in them, any of these people, when I say we, I mean any of those that I just kind of listed and more, but we're not even contributing to them. Like we don't work in them either. So we don't even get the chance to say, oh, I'm a hijab wearing woman. Like, here's some things that we experience. Like, let's put that in the female magazine. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, there was just no diversity in content because there was no diversity of people. So you can say there's diversity of thought. Of course you can. Like, not everyone's the same. I'm not suggesting that all white people have this same view on everything or their life experience. I'm not suggesting that. But there are blatantly other experiences that they wouldn't have lived that were just not being represented. And I just thought that seemed completely unfair, to be honest.
And you made a good point about the kind of culture difference when you come into a workplace and someone sounds a different way or speaks a different way or just because of the that side of things. How would you say people should prepare to going into a workplace environment, especially when the majority of the workplace is from a different cultural background to them?
Yeah, so I always say you start with ideas. Ideas are your currency. So whenever you're going into an organisation, always have ideas because you can use that to start conversations. You can use that to get to know people. I think if you're going into a business where there's like multiple brands within that business, for example, I think when you get your pass, to get in. When you start your workshops, they give you a little pass to get in. I think use that pass and go introduce yourself to everybody else in the other parts of the business. Go up and say hello and drop your CV there. I think, like, whilst you're in that building, rinse it. Get to know as many people as you can. That might be, for some individuals, the only opportunity they've got in the last year that they've been trying. So you need to make it count. So I would go in with ideas. There's some tricks I tried. Like, if you're going in at early careers and you want to be noticed, and they just kind of say, come in, this is your desk and this is what you'll be doing. If you feel that you just come in and tend to speak to this one particular individual who's like your buddy or whatever, I would offer to drop the post to people.
Aha, that's good.
Because then you have to go to everyone's desk and say, hi, I'm Joanna, I'm doing work experience. If you will need any help, let me know. And then they know you're there. I would go around and offer people a cup of tea. Everyone wants a cup of tea.
That is a really good one.
Everyone's busy. Everyone wants a cup of tea. Or do you want me to fill up your water? Or whatever. That just builds a start. And I know it makes you sound like a bit of a slave, but it just breaks the ice. Some people come in, they do their work, head down, they've got so much on, they're not thinking about the work experience, or they're not thinking about the intern. So you just need to make them notice you so that you kind of do come on their radar. And these are just some ways in which you can do that. And then also, when you've got ideas, for example, if it was like a magazine or a TV program, or a production company, you have an idea for a TV program, or you go and join a radio station for a bit, suggest things like, say, oh my god, like, have you heard about this? I saw this in the paper today, I thought X. And when you think of ideas, like I always say, think like, why now? Why that particular organization should do it? Like, give it reason. Don't just go, I've got an idea. Like, give it reason so that they can treat you as a professional, like you've thought it through. And then they'll respond to your suggestion as a professional, because you've gone in with
because you've not just
thought out idea.
Yeah, you've not just gone in and said, okay, well, I'm just going to say this random thing and hopefully it sticks. And if it doesn't stick, oh, well, I tried. But you've actually considered it, and you've kind of thought about how they could utilize it as well.
How it benefits them, And then, because then what they'll do is they'll think, well, this person isn't just trying to get noticed here for the sake of, so that they get a job. They are interested. They are interested in our organisation. Anyone, take it from me as a business owner, if you are interested and passionate about your organisation, people love it. It's what they're thriving on. Like, they want anyone in the building that's going to drive their success. So if you're able to do that, they'll respond. So whenever you can, come up with ideas, make them make sense for that business, explain why you could do them, but also be aware that other people might do them. So be prepared that your idea may be taken on by somebody else. But that just goes to show that you have contributed, but make sure that there is some follow-up for you. So it's not just they take these ideas and then they're like, yeah, she's great, and then exploit you. But make sure that the reason I say she's great is that I've obviously done that before. So just make sure that it's followed up with something that makes it possible for you to keep a handle on some of it too.
A lot of times with society, there's a lot of things I guess you can say there's a lot of obstacles and barriers that Black women in particular face. And at sometimes you can often feel like there's things are stacked against Black women. So for Black women who feel like, what's the point in trying to change things? What's the point in trying to try to go beyond, to change the status quo, to be free and to live as themselves? What would you say to them who feel that way?
Yeah, I get that. I understand that. I feel you. And when I say that, I really feel you. It's exhausting. Taking from someone that has to have the conversation sometimes 8, 9, 10, 12 times a day. Trust me, I feel it. But then if we... I want to know what the alternative is. Because if you're not fighting... I'm not telling everyone to go out and set up an organisation and protest. I'm not suggesting that. You can make changes in your own way. You don't need to even be known for doing it, right? But I just think that if day to day you're going to have to fight those things anyway,
Mm.
because the structures, like the way the society's set up,
It's true.
the way my bank account's set up, like the way society is set up is like it's you're going to have to, like, if you have a black son, he's going to face discrimination when he walks down the street. That's our reality, unfortunately. So as a mixed race black woman who may have a child with a black man, I'm going to have a little black child, and they're going to, do you know what I mean? They're going to, and the reason I say with a black man is, if you don't look black, people let you off. But if you know what I mean, like the racists let you off a bit.
That's a good point.
Do you know what I mean? Or if you like, you get a little bit of a bly. You get a little bit of a like, don't worry about that, that's all right. But if you are, a dark-skinned black person, especially a male, you're going to have a really tough time, right? In America, if you're a black woman, dark-skinned black woman, even worse of the time. So how are you going to get through this without having to at some point challenge the status quo? Like, you send your kids to a school and their teachers have a bias towards your kid, whether your kid is disabled, whether your kid has SEND needs. You're up against that. You're up against challenging the way your child is treated in that room so that they get the best out of their education. Your kid walks down the street in a particular attire and is stopped. You're going to have to challenge that. You're going to, even if the conversation is purely with your son.
It's true.
Or your daughter. You know, if your daughter grows up and goes to work and she's called aggressive because she's assertive, whether your child is a Chinese girl, a white girl, a Pakistani girl, doesn't matter. If she's called aggressive because she's being assertive, you have to deal with her gender. So, like, what's the alternative?
Wow.
I don't think I've met anyone in all my years that said I've never had a microaggression. So unless that's your experience, then fine, don't fight for anything, right? The chances of you walking through life with absolutely no one making a judgment on you, or second guessing your ability, or second guessing your identity, I think is very slim. So at some point, even if you're not doing it on a wider scale like me, going into businesses, you're going to have that dialogue at some point. My friend the other day was talking to her 8-year-old child because when they went back to school, the kids were picking on her, and so before she went to bed, she told her mum, and so they were talking. And even like, that's a successful, hard-working woman, 2 parents in their home, they own their home. Like, there are all these things that were apparently screen privilege, right? But a kid's still going through that. So at some point, she has to have a conversation about resilience, bullying, identity, self-esteem, self-love. So I just think, it's like, I'd say to them, I know it's hard, I know it's not easy, but there is that saying, isn't it, heavy is the head that wears the crown. So if I'd like to think we're all wearing our crowns in some way or another. So unfortunately, it is going to be a little bit heavy at times, but just think of the future that you will create if we all challenge. Like, you've got to bear in mind, like, women weren't allowed to vote, right? And so some women getting angry about that has allowed us to vote.
True.
Right? So eventually, it may take a very long time, may take a lot of pain, it may take a lot of lives lost. And when I mean that, I mean, like, because generationally, not because they've had to sacrifice themselves. I mean, like, it can take years. Like, some people won't even see it in their lifetime, right? But eventually it gets better for someone else. And I guess that's the bit that I think, well, hopefully, if I challenge that teacher, they won't do it to another kid. If I challenge that priest, they won't do it to another family. It's that sort of thing,
So I know you said earlier that this lockdown has been good for you because it's kind of helped rotate your whole schedule. So you've had more time, you've had, a more balanced week by week life. But with all the projects that you're involved in, how do you manage them? How do you juggle? Because I do quite a few things here and there, and some weeks I struggle a lot. Other weeks I'm okay. So how do you manage your stuff?
It's all I've known, if I'm honest. And so everything is related to EDI, equity, diversity, inclusion. So I have Blue Moon. So pretty much every day is about the clients and the people that we're trying to help have more equity, for example. So that's always about them. And then the boards I sit on, they are usually quarterly meetings. So they slot into my diary quite nicely. The steering groups, again, they're the same. So I just make sure that like those dates are always in the diary, so I can be there, I can be present. That I have sort of read all my papers ahead of those meetings, so I know where I'm at and what I'm doing. I can suggest and I can contribute in those meetings. And then and I always have to have stuff in my calendar. If it's not in my calendar, it can go a bit less. So I have to always have it in my calendar, and even like right in front of me here, I've got all of my to-dos for Friday, all of my to-dos for Saturday. So you do have to be like really organised. And I do a lot, like as I say, I get up, I work until 6. I then like have therapy, so then I speak to them, and then I go off and train, and then make my dinner. So I've got my routine like of how, but I've only been able to get that routine because of lockdown. Before that, I had an EA, and she saved my life.
Oh wow.
Like she factored in everything for me, literally saved my life. And especially there was a point when my partner was poorly, really, really poorly. And so I was spending a lot of time at the hospital. So she made that so possible to keep business going, all my board roles going, and not miss one day at the hospital. So like ask for help. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to. I wasn't Superwoman. I was really not Superwoman at that time. I was finding it really hard. So she made it that I could still be professional and keep the business afloat and all the rest of it, but also be a partner like I needed to be at that time.
Wow. Scheduling and planning. That
That's
so key. Well, Joanna, it's been an absolute pleasure. My last question.
Yeah, you too. Thank you for listening to me chat for so long.
My final question of the day is one which I think a lot of us. It's always good to reflect on things, because one of my favorite Steve Jobs quotes is about life and connecting the dots. Because it's easy, things make sense in reflection rather than as it's going, which is one of the most annoying things about life. Because I really wish that we had that perspective as we're going, because it'd make life a lot easier. By looking at all the things you've done in your life, all the things you've experienced, if you were to sit down and speak to your 5-year-old self, what would you say to her?
I would say a few things. I would say you have all you need. You've got everything you need to do whatever you want. You deserve love. You deserve that. And you're good enough. So I think like if you've got those 3 things in your mind, hopefully that helps with resilience. Hopefully that helps with self-esteem. And hopefully that helps with determination. And I think they're probably 3 things that are important for any human being, like to be determined to do whatever it is they want to do, to love themselves enough that they look after themselves health-wise, mentally, surround themselves with nice energies, good people. And you've got everything you need. Like, don't try to be anyone else. Just stay true to yourself. Like, go with what you've got, kind of thing.